Chosen one, your ex is beginning to realize something they tried very hard not to see. You were not ordinary, and that realization is not coming to them gently. It is coming through silence. It is coming through memory. It is coming through the strange emptiness they feel in places where your presence used to cover them. They may not say it out loud yet. Pride may still be standing in the doorway. Their mouth may still be silent. Their image may still look untouched. They may still act like they moved on, like nothing serious happened, like you were just another chapter they could close and forget. But something inside them knows. Something inside them has started to understand that what happened between you was not just a breakup. It was not just a misunderstanding. It was not just two people going separate ways. They mishandled sacred access. They were allowed close enough to see parts of you that most people never get to see. They saw your softness. They saw your patience. They saw the way you kept trying when most people would have left. They saw the way you forgave. They saw the way you prayed. They saw the way you still wanted to believe in them, even when their actions gave you reasons to stop. And instead of protecting what they had been given, they treated it like it would always be there. They thought your loyalty was weakness. They thought your silence meant you had no power. They thought your forgiveness meant there would always be another chance. They thought your heart was a place they could enter, damage, leave, and return to whenever life outside of your presence became too cold. But sacred access carries sacred responsibility, and when a person mishandles what is sacred, life has a way of teaching them what your tears could not. This message is not here to make you chase them. It is not here to make you wait for them. It is not here to make you open a door that God may have closed for your protection. This is not about revenge. This is about revelation, because there is a difference between someone missing you and someone being mature enough to honor you. There is a difference between someone feeling regret and someone carrying real repentance. There is a difference between someone wanting your presence back and someone becoming safe enough to stand near your spirit again. And if you do not understand that difference, you may reopen a door just because loneliness knocks with a familiar voice. So listen carefully. By the end of this message, you are going to understand why this ending felt heavier than a normal heartbreak. You are going to understand the spiritual law they broke when they mishandled your heart. You are going to see the signs that they are now feeling the weight of your absence. You are going to understand why their regret does not automatically mean they deserve access again. And most importantly, you are going to learn how to take back your inner signal, the part of you that used to know the truth before someone trained you to doubt yourself. Because that is what this is really about. It is not just about them realizing who you were. It is about you realizing who you became while trying to be loved by someone who did not know how to honor you. This breakup did not feel normal because it did not only touch your emotions, it touched your spirit. It touched the part of you that still believed love could be safe. It touched the part of you that had already survived things people knew nothing about. It touched the part of you that finally took a risk and opened a private room inside your soul. That is why the pain did not behave like normal pain. That is why one song could pull you back into a memory you thought you had already buried. That is why one place, one scent, one date, one small detail could make your whole body remember what your mind was trying to move past. That is why you did not only ask, why did they leave? You asked, how could they do that after knowing me? Because they knew. They knew your soft places. They knew what it cost you to trust. They knew how hard it was for you to open up. They knew the way you tried to understand them, even when they kept giving you confusion. They knew the way you forgave things you should have never had to carry. They knew you were not someone who loved casually. They knew your love came with depth. They knew your heart was not a public place. And still, they mishandled it. Maybe they betrayed you directly. Maybe they slowly withdrew and made you feel crazy for noticing. Maybe they let other people disrespect you and stayed silent. Maybe they told a version of the story that made you look unstable, dramatic, needy, insecure, or hard to love. Maybe they used your vulnerability against you. Maybe they acted like your pain was an inconvenience. Maybe they replaced your presence quickly because sitting with the truth would have required them to face themselves. Maybe they did not cheat with a person, but they cheated the sacred agreement by making you feel alone inside a connection that was supposed to feel safe. Whatever form it took, the deeper wound was the same. They touched what was sacred without honor. And chosen one, that is a law people do not understand until life begins to speak. Access is not ownership. Just because someone gets close to you does not mean they have the right to handle you any way they want. Just because you love someone does not mean they have permission to drain you, confuse you, betray you, abandon you, and return whenever their loneliness starts missing the warmth they did not protect. Just because you forgave them before does not mean your heart was created to be a place where they could keep rehearsing the same wound. Forgiveness is holy, but access is earned. Love is sacred, but responsibility must come with it. Your patience was not permission. Your silence was not agreement. Your loyalty was not weakness. Your willingness to understand them did not mean they were allowed to destroy your peace and call it love. This is the spiritual law they broke. Sacred access requires sacred responsibility. And when someone is given access to a chosen one, they are not just receiving affection, they are receiving proximity to a soul that carries weight. That does not mean you are better than them. It means you were not meant to be handled carelessly. There is a difference. You are not perfect. You had lessons too. You had wounds too. You had fears too. You had moments where you reacted from pain. You had places where you still needed healing. You had patterns you needed to see, boundaries you needed to build, and parts of yourself you may have abandoned because you were afraid of being abandoned by them. But even with all of that, the truth remains. They were trusted with something sacred, and they treated it like it was common. And now something in their life is beginning to show them the weight of that mistake. Not always in a dramatic way. Sometimes correction is quiet. Sometimes it arrives as a memory they cannot shake. Sometimes it arrives when they hear a phrase you used to say and suddenly feel their chest tighten. Sometimes it arrives when they are sitting next to someone else, but their spirit knows the peace is not the same. Sometimes it arrives when they reach for a distraction, but the distraction cannot cover the emptiness. Sometimes it arrives when they see you becoming quieter, stronger, more distant, and somehow more powerful. Sometimes it arrives when they realize you are no longer trying to be seen by them. And that is when your absence starts speaking louder than your explanations ever did. There are signs they are feeling it, even if they never admit it. The first sign is that they keep returning to your energy, even if they refuse to return to your face. They may check your page. They may ask about you indirectly. They may watch from a distance. They may pretend it is curiosity, but something in them is searching for evidence of whether you are still wounded, still waiting, still available, still affected. But what unsettles them is not that you are gone. What unsettles them is that you are no longer leaking your energy toward them. Before, they could feel your attention. They could feel your emotional availability. They could feel that part of you was still listening, still hoping, still wondering, still trying to understand. Now, the line feels different. They can think about you, but they cannot pull from you the way they once did. They can remember you, but they cannot feed from your emotional openness. They can look in your direction, but they cannot enter the room inside you that used to keep making excuses for them. The second sign is that they compare everyone else to the peace you gave them, not always consciously. They may not sit there and say, "Nobody loves me like they did," but their body knows, their spirit knows. They notice when someone else does not listen with the same patience. They notice when someone else does not understand their silence. They notice when another person is there physically, but something feels spiritually loud, empty, or temporary. They may have thought they wanted freedom from your depths. Now they are beginning to understand that what they called too much may have been the very thing that made them feel covered. The third sign is restlessness. They may have expected to feel lighter after leaving you. They may have expected relief. They may have expected their new life, new person, new routine, or new freedom to prove they made the right choice. But instead, there is a strange restlessness. Their mind keeps returning to moments they never properly honored, the conversation they avoided, the apology they never gave, the moment they knew they were wrong but chose pride, the look in your eyes when something in you finally understood that they were not going to protect your heart. They may still be busy, they may still be smiling, they may still be posting, they may still be surrounded by noise. But noise is not peace, and deep down, they know the difference. The fourth sign is that they start seeing your value after losing access to your softness. Some people only value light after they are left alone with the darkness they chose. When you were close, your goodness may have looked ordinary to them because they had it too often. Your forgiveness felt normal. Your support felt expected. Your warmth felt available. Your prayers were invisible. Your patience was taken for granted. But once you withdrew, they began to notice the absence of what they used to receive without asking. The calm you brought, the emotional covering you gave, the way you could sense when something was wrong, the way you tried to bring truth without humiliating them, the way you kept loving even while you were hurting. They may not have known how much your presence was holding until your absence stopped holding it. The fifth sign is that they try to rewrite the meaning of what happened. Sometimes when a person realizes they mishandled someone sacred, they do not immediately confess it. They minimize it. They say it was not that serious. They say both people made mistakes. They say you were too emotional. They say you changed. They say they just needed space. They say you are making it deeper than it was. But listen closely. People often minimize what they are not ready to be accountable for. If it was truly nothing, they would not need to keep explaining it away. If you were truly ordinary to them, your absence would not keep creating noise inside their spirit. If they were truly at peace with what they did, they would not need to keep making your pain look unreasonable. Some part of them knows, but knowing is not the same as changing. That is where you must become wise, because when you hear that they may be realizing your worth, one part of your heart may want to turn around. One part of you may want to imagine the message, the apology, the confession, the late-night text, the moment where they finally say, "I see it now. I know what I did. I should have never treated you that way." And maybe that moment will come. Maybe it will not. But your healing cannot depend on their confession. Your freedom cannot depend on their regret. Your next season cannot wait for the person who wounded you to finally explain the wound they created. You are not being asked to chase their realization. You are being asked to understand your own. Because the real revelation is not only that they lost you, the real revelation is that you almost lost yourself trying to be loved by someone who did not know how to honor what they had been given. You lowered your voice to keep peace. You questioned your intuition to avoid conflict. You explained your heart to someone who kept acting like your pain was a debate. You tried to become easier to love by becoming smaller, quieter, more patient, more forgiving, more available, more understanding. And still, they mishandled you. So now the lesson is not, how do I make them see me? The lesson is, why did I stay so long where I was not being honored? That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to bring you back to yourself. Because many chosen ones are trained to confuse endurance with love. They think if they can just carry more, forgive more, explain more, wait more, pray more, and understand more, then the person will finally become who they hoped they could be. But love is not proven by how much dishonor you can survive. Love is proven by whether both people can hold what is sacred with care. And they did not. That is why the door had to close. Not because you were not worthy. Not because you were too hard to love. Not because you were too emotional, too deep, too intense, too spiritual, or too much. The door closed because the version of you that kept accepting crumbs was no longer allowed to lead you into your future. There is a higher part of you that knew, even when your heart was still attached. Something deeper inside you knew. Something in you felt the shift before the ending happened. Something in you noticed the change in their tone. Something in you noticed the distance in their energy. Something in you noticed the strange feeling that your spirit was no longer safe in the same place your heart still wanted to stay. That inner knowing was not paranoia. It was protection speaking. But here is what happens when you spend too long around someone who keeps dismissing your inner knowing. The signal gets weaker. At first, you know something is wrong. Then they deny it. Then you feel it again. Then they make you feel dramatic for noticing. Then you try to explain. Then they accuse you of overthinking. Then you apologize for the very discernment that was trying to protect you. Little by little, your inner signal becomes covered by their voice. You stop asking, "What do I know?" You start asking, "What will they allow me to know?" You stop trusting the feeling in your spirit. You start waiting for evidence strong enough that no one can argue with you. You stop moving with clarity. You start living in fog. And that fog is not who you are. You were not created to live in confusion. You were not created to beg your own spirit for permission to believe what it already knows. You were not created to shrink your perception just because someone else was uncomfortable being seen clearly. As a child, you may have been sharper than people understood. You could sense rooms. You could feel when something was off. You could notice patterns before anyone explained them. You could read energy. You could imagine deeply. You could feel deeply. You could know things without knowing how you knew. Then life happened. Criticism happened. Rejection happened. Betrayal happened. Relationships happened. People called you too sensitive. People called you dramatic. People called you intense. People treated your intuition like a problem because your clarity exposed places they wanted to hide. And slowly, the signal became noise. The clarity became fog. The person who once knew became the person who kept asking, "Am I crazy for feeling this?" No, chosen one. You were not crazy. You were conditioned. You were trained to distrust a gift because the wrong people benefited from your confusion. And this is why what happens next in your healing matters so much. Because if you only focus on whether your ex regrets losing you, you will miss the greater assignment. The greater assignment is to get your signal back. The greater assignment is to return to the version of you that can feel truth without needing permission. The greater assignment is to rebuild the inner clarity that betrayal tried to damage. The greater assignment is to stop letting the voice of someone who mishandled you become louder than the voice of God within you. Later in this message, I am going to show you a simple 7-minute daily reset that can help support that process of clearing mental fog and reconnecting with your inner clarity. Not as magic, not as pressure, not as a replacement for prayer, healing, boundaries, or wise counsel, but as a small sacred ritual for the person who is tired of waking up with their mind replaying what broke them. Because sometimes the next level of healing does not begin with another long explanation. Sometimes it begins when your mind finally becomes quiet enough to hear your own spirit again. But before we go there, you need to understand the most dangerous trap after someone realizes your worth. The trap is not that they may come back. The trap is that the old you may still want to give them the same access. And the old you cannot be allowed to lead this decision. The old you might hear their voice and forget the wound. The old you might see one message and forget the pattern. The old you might feel wanted again and mistake that feeling for safety. The old you might think, maybe this is the apology I waited for. Maybe this is the moment everything changes. Maybe if I give them one more chance, they will finally love me correctly. But the version of you being formed now has to ask a deeper question. Are they coming back with honor? Or are they coming back with hunger? Because hunger wants to take. Honor knows how to handle. Hunger wants access. Honor accepts responsibility. Hunger says, I need you. Honor says, I understand what I did, and I am willing to change even if you never reopen the door. That is the difference. And that difference may save your future. Because a person can miss you and still not know how to honor you. A person can regret losing you and still not understand what they broke. A person can cry over your absence and still be unwilling to become responsible with your presence. A person can say, "I finally understand," and still return with the same patterns wearing softer words. So do not confuse emotional intensity with transformation. Some people come back because they have changed. Others come back because the life they chose no longer comforts them. Some come back because they miss your energy, not because they are ready to respect your boundaries. Some come back because they remember how safe you made them feel, not because they are prepared to become safe for you. And this is where you must stop romanticizing regret. Regret can be emotional. Repentance is behavioral. Regret says, "I feel bad." Repentance says, "I will not keep becoming the person who made you feel unsafe." Regret wants relief. Repentance accepts truth. Regret may want your comfort. Repentance respects your boundary. Regret may cry at the door. Repentance does not break the door down. So if they return, do not only listen to the tone of their voice. Watch the fruit. Do their words carry ownership, or do they still carry excuses? Do their actions create safety, or do they only create emotion? Do they honor your boundaries, or do they pressure you to move faster than your peace allows? Do they care about your healing, or only about relieving their guilt? Do they respect the door, or do they only want the key? That is how you will know, and if the answer is not clear, then the answer is not access. Peace is allowed to be slow. Trust is allowed to require evidence. Your heart is allowed to wait. Your spirit is allowed to observe. Your future is allowed to remain protected from anyone who cannot handle the weight of your becoming. Because what is coming next for you requires clean space. It requires clean energy. It requires relationships that do not make you betray your inner knowing. It requires people who do not become threatened when your light grows brighter. It requires love that does not need you wounded in order to feel powerful. It requires friendship that can hold your elevation without turning it into competition. It requires a spiritual environment where your peace is not constantly under negotiation. Your ex may be realizing you are not ordinary, but you are about to realize something even greater. You are not available for ordinary treatment anymore. You are not available for half love anymore. You are not available for spiritual carelessness anymore. You are not available for people who want your light but reject your truth. You are not available for cycles that require you to abandon yourself in order to keep someone else comfortable. That season is over, and I hear the Father saying, "Do not go back to the place that only recognized your light after it became fire." Let that settle. Some people did not honor the candle. They ignored the small flame. They mocked the warmth. They took advantage of the light while it was close. But now that the fire is rising, now that the glow is visible, now that your absence has become louder than your explanations, they want to understand what they once dismissed. But the fire is not rising for them. It is rising for your calling. It is rising for your healing. It is rising for the version of you that no longer begs to be held by hands that proved careless. It is rising so you can see your own path. And if they have to watch from a distance, let them watch. If they have to learn through memory, let them learn. If they have to sit with the silence they created, let them sit. If they have to realize late, let them realize late. But you, chosen one, must not be late to your own life. You must not stay at the grave of a relationship God already used as a doorway. You must not keep watering what was only meant to teach you. You must not keep carrying someone else's lesson as if it is your responsibility to make them pass it. You have your own assignment now. Your assignment is to heal without becoming hard. Your assignment is to rise without becoming arrogant. Your assignment is to remember without returning to bondage. Your assignment is to forgive without handing over the keys. Your assignment is to protect the sacred without apologizing for the boundary. Because what they broke, God can restore. What they mishandled, God can make whole. What they called too much, God can use as evidence of your depth. What they rejected, God can refine. What they misunderstood, God can reveal. In the right season, to the right people, in the right rooms, with the right kind of honor. But first, you must stop handing sacred access to people who only become gentle when they are afraid of losing you. You must stop confusing their panic with their transformation. You must stop calling a temporary wave of emotion a permanent change of character. You must stop treating their delayed realization as the foundation of your healing. Their realization is not your assignment. Your restoration is. Their regret is not your responsibility. Your clarity is. Their apology, if it comes, is not the doorway to your freedom. Your discernment is. And that discernment is coming back. The signal is coming back. The part of you that knows before evidence appears is coming back. The part of you that can feel truth beneath words is coming back. The part of you that was trained to shrink is remembering its original frequency again. And in the next part of this message, we are going to go deeper into the exact reason your inner signal became foggy, how to take back sacred access without becoming bitter, and the small daily reset that can help you begin quieting the noise so you can hear yourself again. Because the person who mishandled you may finally be waking up, but this time, so are you. Because awakening is not just what happens when they realize your worth. Awakening is what happens when you finally stop asking the person who wounded you to explain who you are. For too long, part of you may have waited for their realization like it was the missing piece. You thought if they finally understood, then your pain would make sense. You thought if they finally admitted what they did, then your heart could rest. You thought if they finally said, "I was wrong," then the part of you that kept questioning yourself would finally become quiet. But chosen one, your peace cannot be built on the confession of someone who already showed you they could mishandle truth. Your healing cannot depend on whether they become honest. Your clarity cannot depend on whether they become mature. Your future cannot wait for the person who broke your trust to become the person who validates your story. Because even if they never say it, your spirit already knows. Even if they never apologize, the truth already knows. Even if they never admit what they did, heaven already saw how your heart was handled. And now, the assignment is not to make them understand. The assignment is to come back into agreement with yourself. That is where your power returns. Not when they miss you, not when they regret you, not when they finally see you. Your power returns when you stop needing their eyes to become the mirror of your value. Because one of the deepest wounds after betrayal is not only that someone left, it is that they left you doubting the part of yourself that knew something was wrong long before the ending came. You felt the shift. You felt the distance. You felt the change in their energy. You felt when their words and their spirit were no longer saying the same thing. You felt when affection became performance. You felt when communication became strategy. You felt when love started feeling like a place where you had to walk carefully, speak carefully, ask carefully, feel carefully, and shrink carefully. But because you loved them, you tried to reason with the signal. You told yourself, maybe I am overthinking. Maybe I am being too sensitive. Maybe I am bringing old wounds into this. Maybe I should be more patient. Maybe I should give them more space. Maybe I should stop asking questions. Maybe I should stop needing reassurance. Maybe I should stop feeling so much. And little by little, you did something that hurt you more deeply than you realized. You negotiated with your own knowing. You stood in front of your own spirit and asked it to be quiet so the relationship could survive. But a relationship that requires you to silence your discernment is not love. It is conditioning. A connection that requires you to betray your inner signal is not safety. It is spiritual confusion, and many chosen ones know exactly what this feels like. They do not just get heartbroken, they get foggy. They lose their sharpness. They lose their natural clarity. They stop trusting their first feeling. They start needing too much proof. They replay conversations for hours. They read old messages. They analyze tone. They ask friends what something meant. They pray for a sign after the sign has already come. They stay awake at night, trying to solve the mystery of someone who was never as confused as they made you feel. And that is how emotional pain becomes mental fog. That is how betrayal becomes noise. That is how the voice of someone who mishandled you can become louder in your mind than the voice of God within you. But that fog is not your identity. That confusion is not your natural state. That overthinking is not who you are. It is what happens when a sensitive spirit has been forced to survive in a place where truth was constantly denied. You were not created to live like that. You were not created to wake up with their name in your chest. You were not created to spend another night replaying what they said, what they meant, what they hid, what they changed, what they avoided, what they never admitted. You were not created to measure your worth by someone else's emotional capacity. You were not created to keep explaining sacred things to careless hands. There is a clearer version of you underneath the fog. There is a sharper version of you underneath the grief. There is a stronger version of you underneath the part that kept waiting to be chosen again. And that version is not gone. It has just been covered by disappointment, covered by overstimulation, covered by emotional survival, covered by the mental noise of trying to make sense of what your spirit already understood. That is why this season is not just about moving on. It is about clearing the noise. It is about reclaiming the part of your mind that betrayal tried to scatter. It is about returning to the inner signal that used to guide you before pain trained you to second-guess everything. Because when your signal is clear, you stop begging for closure from people who keep benefiting from your confusion. When your signal is clear, you stop mistaking chemistry for covenant. When your signal is clear, you stop calling anxiety intuition, and you stop calling intuition anxiety. When your signal is clear, you stop opening doors just because someone knocks with a softer voice. When your signal is clear, you can forgive without forgetting what the pattern revealed. When your signal is clear, you can love without abandoning yourself. And when your signal is clear, you no longer need to hate the person who hurt you, because you are too busy returning to the person you were always becoming. This is where many people get stuck. They try to heal only through emotion. They cry, they pray, they journal, they talk, they explain, they remember, they release. And all of those things can matter. But sometimes the mind is still noisy. Sometimes the body is tired. Sometimes the spirit is ready to move forward. But the brain keeps replaying the old pain like a broken song. Sometimes you know the truth, but you cannot feel calm enough to live from it. Sometimes you know you should not go back, but your nervous system keeps reaching for what was familiar. Sometimes you know they mishandled you, but your mind still wants to create one more excuse. That is why a small daily reset can matter more than people realize. Not because a tool saves you. God saves. Truth saves. Discernment saves. Boundaries protect. But a tool can support the process of becoming clear enough to hear what has already been speaking inside you. And this is why I want to share something with you gently. There is a 7-minute audio experience called the Genius Song. It is designed to be listened to with headphones, and it uses sound in a way that is meant to support brain entrainment, guiding the mind toward a clearer, more awakened state, often connected with focus, intuition, and mental sharpness. This is not about becoming chosen. You already are. This is not about buying your way into purpose. Purpose was already written over you. This is not a replacement for prayer. It is not a replacement for healing. It is not a replacement for therapy, wise counsel, boundaries, rest, or the spiritual work of telling yourself the truth. But for the person who has been living in fog, for the person whose mind keeps replaying betrayal, for the person who knows they are called to more but keeps waking up heavy, distracted, and mentally exhausted, this can become a simple sacred reset. 7 minutes. Headphones on. No explaining. No chasing. No checking their page. No replaying the conversation. No begging your mind to stop thinking about what broke you. Just 7 minutes where you sit with yourself and allow your mind to begin remembering that it was never created to live under the noise of someone else's confusion. According to the information behind it, the Genius song is connected to the work of Dr. Robert Lake, who has spent decades studying the brain, and the audio is designed around frequencies that support clarity, focus, and the reactivation of your inner genius signal. And I want you to hear that phrase deeply. Your inner genius signal. Not because you need to become some perfect, superhuman version of yourself, but because there is a part of you that knows. There is a part of you that can sense alignment. There is a part of you that can recognize truth beneath words. There is a part of you that can create, decide, discern, and move with confidence when the fog is not covering it. That is the part betrayal tried to bury. That is the part overthinking tried to drown. That is the part emotional chaos tried to scatter. And that is the part you are now being invited to strengthen again. Some people who use the Genius song describe feeling clearer, more focused, and more connected to themselves after listening consistently. Not because the audio does the inner work for them, but because it gives them a simple daily doorway into stillness, intention, and mental alignment. And for this message, that matters. Because after being mishandled by someone you loved, the breakthrough is not always another emotional breakdown. Sometimes the breakthrough is the first morning you wake up and their energy no longer owns your mind. Sometimes the breakthrough is the first evening you choose your peace instead of checking for a sign from them. Sometimes the breakthrough is the moment you hear your own inner voice more clearly than you hear the memory of their excuses. Sometimes the breakthrough is not loud. Sometimes it is 7 quiet minutes where you finally stop letting the past be the first voice in your head. That is why I do not want you to treat this like a random product. Treat it like a decision that your mind is no longer going to be a room where betrayal keeps playing on repeat. A decision that your clarity matters. A decision that your inner signal is worth protecting. A decision that you are not going to spend another season being mentally tied to someone who could only recognize your value after mishandling it. The original price is listed at $49, but there is currently a reduced price of $39 for viewers who feel called to explore it. It is delivered digitally, so you can begin using it without waiting for anything to be shipped. It also includes bonuses designed to support focus, clarity, visualization, and intentional living. And there is a money-back guarantee, so you are not being asked to take a blind risk. But listen carefully. Do not search randomly for it. There are fake versions, imitation pages, and people using the name without the real audio or the complete bonus package. If this resonates with your spirit, use only the link in the description and the pinned comment. That is the safest way to make sure you are seeing the correct version. And before you let another night pass with your mind replaying what someone else broke, consider giving yourself 7 minutes. Not 7 minutes for them. 7 minutes for you. 7 minutes to stop feeding the memory. 7 minutes to sit with your own spirit. 7 minutes to begin clearing the fog. 7 minutes to tell your mind, I am no longer living under the voice of the person who mishandled me. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Use it when you are ready to make clarity a daily act of self-respect. Now come back to the deeper truth. A tool can support clarity, but boundaries protect the sacred. Because once your signal begins to return, the next thing you must decide is who no longer gets access to the room where God is rebuilding you. This is where the Sacred Access Audit begins. Inside yourself, picture your heart as a room with a door. Do not move your body. Do not force emotion. Do not try to perform healing. Just imagine that room. It is not a weak room. It is not a broken room. It is not a desperate room. It is a sacred room. There is light in it. There is history in it. There are prayers in it. There are parts of you in that room that survived things no one clapped for. There are dreams in that room that almost died because someone made you feel foolish for believing. There is softness in that room that life tried to harden. There is trust in that room that has been bruised but not destroyed. There is a version of you in that room that still wants to love, but no longer wants to lose itself for love. Now look at the door. On the outside of that door are people who once had access to your softness, your time, your loyalty, your explanations, your forgiveness, your spiritual attention, your body, your prayers, your emotional labor, your late-night patience, your willingness to understand. Some of those people were grateful, some were not. Some honored you, some consumed you, some protected your name, some used your vulnerability as a weapon, some became safer after seeing your pain, some became more careless because they assumed you would always forgive. And now, without hatred, without drama, without revenge, you must ask the truth. Did this person honor what they knew about me? Did this person become more responsible after seeing my pain? Did this person protect my name when I was not in the room? Did this person change their behavior? Or did they only change their tone when they felt me pulling away? Did this person bring peace into my spirit? Or did I have to keep abandoning myself to keep them close? Did this person respect my boundaries? Or did they make me feel guilty for finally having them? Did this person love me? Or did they love the access I gave them? Let the answers rise. Do not argue with them. Do not cover them. Do not rush to defend the person who hurt you. Do not use your compassion to silence your discernment. You can understand why someone became the way they are and still admit they were unsafe for you. You can have compassion for their wounds and still refuse to become the place where those wounds keep bleeding. You can forgive their humanity and still protect your future. This is where chosen ones must become spiritually mature, because your gift is that you can often see why someone is broken, but your danger is that you can become so focused on why they are broken that you forget they are still breaking you. You can see their childhood wounds. You can see their fear. You can see their insecurity. You can see their avoidance. You can see their shame. You can see the pain behind their pride. But seeing the reason does not remove the responsibility. Understanding someone does not mean you must keep giving them access. Compassion is holy, but self-abandonment is not. Forgiveness is powerful, but repeated exposure to dishonor is not wisdom. And this is why regret must be tested by fruit. Not feelings, fruit. Not tears, fruit. Not words, fruit. Not the way they sound when they miss you, fruit. Because a person can cry and still lie. A person can apologize and still repeat. A person can miss you and still manipulate. A person can say, "I have changed," while still resisting the accountability that change requires. So before anyone receives access to you again, they must pass through truth. Not nostalgia, truth. Not loneliness, truth. Not chemistry, truth. Not spiritual language, truth. Not the emotional pull of what could have been, truth. The Sacred Access Audit is not there to punish people. It is there to protect what God is rebuilding in you. Because the next version of you cannot be surrounded by people who only value you after they lose you. The next version of you cannot keep giving sacred access to those who treat your heart like a place they can enter and exit whenever their life feels empty. The next version of you cannot keep confusing compassion with self-abandonment. You can forgive them and still not reopen the door. You can wish them healing and still choose distance. You can acknowledge their regret and still protect your peace. You can love what was real and still admit that what was real was not enough to make it safe. That is maturity. That is discernment. That is spiritual adulthood. And this is where your ex's realization becomes less important than your release. Because for a long time, you may have imagined their regret as the proof. You may have thought, if they come back, then I will know I mattered. If they apologize, then I will know I was not crazy. If they admit they were wrong, then I will know I was valuable. But chosen one, you cannot let the person who mishandled the sacred become the judge of what was sacred. They do not get that seat anymore. Their realization may confirm something, but it cannot define anything. Their regret may be real, but it cannot become your foundation. Their apology may come, but it cannot become your oxygen. You are not waiting to be validated. You are learning to be free. So right now, inside your spirit, imagine every key you gave away returning to your hand. The key to your attention, the key to your emotional availability, the key to your late-night explanations, the key to your body, remembering pain that your spirit is ready to release, the key to your forgiveness, being used without change, the key to your name being discussed by people who never had the maturity to know you, the key to your future being delayed by someone who could only honor you after losing you, the key to your mind being occupied by their confusion, the key to your peace being interrupted every time their memory knocks. See those keys returning, un by un, not with anger, not with revenge, not with panic, with authority, with calm, with the quiet dignity of someone who finally understands that access to you is not casual. Now inside your spirit, say this: I take back sacred access. I take back my peace. I take back my name. I take back my softness. I take back my inner signal. I take back the part of me that kept waiting to be chosen by someone who had already shown me they did not know how to honor what was chosen. And as those keys return, do not imagine yourself attacking them. Do not imagine revenge. Do not imagine their downfall. That is not the image. Imagine the door becoming clear, not slammed, not shaken, not dramatic, closed with peace, closed with wisdom, closed with the calm knowing that what is sacred does not have to argue for its value. This is how you release without becoming cold. You do not harden your heart. You guard it. You do not stop loving. You stop leaking. You do not stop caring. You stop carrying what was never yours to fix. You do not become bitter. You become honest. You do not punish them. You stop rescuing them from the consequences of how they handled you. There is a difference. And if this message is confirming something your spirit already knew, you can comment one simple sentence: I take back sacred access. Not for performance, not for attention, but as a declaration that your heart is no longer public property for people who only recognize holiness after they have wounded it. Because something shifts when you say it. Not because the comment itself has power, but because agreement has power. When you agree with truth, the lie begins to lose its grip. When you agree with dignity, desperation begins to weaken. When you agree with discernment, confusion begins to clear. When you agree with God about your value, the voices that made you feel ordinary begin to sound smaller. So comment it if your spirit feels led. I take back sacred access. And then live like it. Do not just declare it here and then go back to checking what they are doing. Do not just write it and then reopen the same wound tonight. Do not just speak it and then hand your peace back to the same memory. Let it become a line in the spirit. Let it become a boundary in your mind. Let it become a new agreement in your body. Let it become the beginning of a different pattern, because the next season of your life will require selective access. Not everyone who misses you gets to return. Not everyone who apologizes gets the same seat. Not everyone who remembers your goodness gets to benefit from it again. Not everyone who feels your absence is mature enough to hold your presence. And you are allowed to know the difference. You are allowed to forgive without reopening. You are allowed to love from a distance. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that kept explaining. You are allowed to stop auditioning for the role of being valued. You are allowed to protect what is being rebuilt in you. You are allowed to disappoint people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. You are allowed to become unavailable to what once kept you wounded. And you do not owe anyone an apology for finally honoring what they refused to honor. This is where the story changes, because before the question was, do they finally see me? Now the question is, do I finally see myself? Before the question was, will they come back? Now the question is, who am I becoming if they do? Before, the question was, do they regret losing me? Now the question is, have I learned not to lose myself again? That is the real shift. That is the deeper awakening. That is the place where healing becomes power. Because the strongest version of you is not the version that gets revenge. It is not the version that makes them jealous. It is not the version that performs happiness so they can see what they lost. The strongest version of you is the version that becomes so anchored in truth that their recognition no longer controls your nervous system. The strongest version of you is the version that can receive an apology without becoming addicted to the possibility of access. The strongest version of you is the version that can remember the good without denying the harm. The strongest version of you is the version that can bless them from a distance and still keep the door closed if peace requires it. The strongest version of you is the version that no longer mistakes emotional hunger for divine confirmation. Because yes, they may feel it, they may realize it, they may look back, they may miss you, they may replay the moment they lost access. They may understand too late that you were not ordinary. But you cannot build your next season around their delayed awakening. You must build it around your own. And your awakening will look like this. You will stop needing to explain everything. You will stop telling the same story to people committed to misunderstanding you. You will stop checking whether they are watching. You will stop giving emotional discounts to people who repeatedly cost you peace. You will stop betraying your body when it says no. You will stop ignoring the first sign because you are attached to the fantasy. You will stop making excuses for patterns just because you understand pain. You will stop calling it love when it keeps requiring you to disappear. And one day soon, you will realize something beautiful. Your mind is quieter. Your chest is lighter. Your prayers are clearer. Your standards are stronger. Your energy is returning. Your softness is still there, but it is no longer unguarded. Your love is still there, but it is no longer desperate. Your heart is still open, but it is no longer unlocked for people who have not earned the key. That is not bitterness. That is restoration. That is not coldness. That is wisdom. That is not pride. That is the sacred finally being protected by the person who carries it. And in the final part of this message, you need to understand what happens after the door closes. Why your silence may be the most powerful response you have ever given, and how God uses the very wound that almost broke you to reveal the version of you they were never able to stop. Because they may have realized you were not ordinary, but what God is about to restore in you will prove that you were never just surviving the loss. You were being prepared for the rise, and that is what they did not understand. They thought the ending was only an ending. They thought the silence was only pain. They thought your distance was only weakness. They thought your tears meant you would always be emotionally tied to the place where they left you. But they did not understand that sometimes God lets a door close so the chosen one can finally stop bleeding into rooms that were never assigned to hold their future. Sometimes the relationship ends, not because love was never real, but because access was no longer safe. Sometimes the person you wanted becomes the person God uses to show you where you were still willing to abandon yourself. Sometimes the heartbreak becomes the mirror. Sometimes the betrayal becomes the separation. Sometimes the silence becomes the surgery. And sometimes the very person who made you feel ordinary becomes the reason you finally remember that you are not. That is why you cannot waste this season trying to make them understand what God is using to restore you. You cannot keep turning back to the place of your injury and asking it to become the place of your identity. You cannot keep returning to the old wound just because the person who caused it is finally beginning to feel the weight of what they did. Let them feel it. Let them learn. Let them sit with the silence they created. Let them remember the tenderness they mishandled. Let them replay the moment they chose pride over honor. Let them realize that the person they treated as common was carrying a sacred kind of love. But you, chosen one, must not stay there watching their lesson. You have your own assignment, and your assignment is not to monitor their regret. Your assignment is to protect your restoration. That is why your silence matters now. Not silence from fear, not silence from weakness, not silence because their version of the story is true, not silence Because you have no words. You have words. You have memories. You have receipts. You have moments you could explain. You have pain you could describe in detail. You have every reason to tell the story in a way that makes people finally understand what you survived. But sometimes the most powerful thing a chosen one can do is stop explaining sacred pain to people who only want entertainment, validation, or control. Your silence is not defeat. Your silence is withdrawal. Your silence is the moment your spirit stops negotiating with dishonor. Your silence is the locked door that says, I no longer need to prove my wound to people who benefited from my lack of boundaries. Your silence is the dignity of someone who finally understands that truth does not need to scream in order to stand. This is the silent dignity rule. When you feel tempted to send the long message, pause. Ask yourself, will this bring truth or will this reopen a wound? When you feel tempted to correct their version of the story, pause. Ask yourself, am I defending truth or am I begging for validation from people who were never assigned to understand me? When you feel tempted to check if they are watching, pause. Ask yourself, why am I still looking backward at the place God already pulled me out of? When you feel tempted to respond to their sudden softness, pause. Ask yourself, is this accountability or is this loneliness wearing a tender voice? When you feel tempted to prove you are healed, pause. Ask yourself, am I healing or am I performing freedom for the person who still has too much access to my attention? Because your attention is access. Your emotional reaction is access. Your repeated explanation is access. Your late night checking is access. Your secret hoping is access. Your constant replaying is access. And some doors do not reopen through conversation. They reopen through attention. That is why you must guard not only who can speak to you, but who can occupy your mind. Because there are people you have not talked to in months who still have a room inside your thoughts. There are people you blocked physically, but not emotionally. There are people you left in reality, but still visit in memory. There are people who no longer have your number, but still have your nervous system. And this is the level of healing God is calling you into now. Not just no contact, no ownership, not just no message, no mental throne, not just no return, no hidden agreement with the lie that their recognition is still required for your freedom. You are taking back more than your phone. You are taking back your inner world. You are taking back your morning. You are taking back your sleep. You are taking back the space in your mind where their confusion kept echoing. You are taking back the softness that became afraid to be seen. You are taking back the confidence that betrayal tried to bury. You are taking back the discernment that gaslighting tried to weaken. You are taking back the sacred. And once you take it back, you must not hand it away cheaply again. Because a new season requires a new access policy. Not everyone gets the same seat. Not everyone gets the same explanation. Not everyone gets the same emotional discount. Not everyone gets the same second chance. Not everyone gets the same view into your heart. Not everyone who says they miss you deserves to know where you are vulnerable. Not everyone who apologizes deserves immediate closeness. Not everyone who cries has become safe. Not everyone who says the right words has allowed truth to change their character. You must learn to watch the fruit. Fruit is not a beautiful apology. Fruit is changed behavior over time. Fruit is consistency when they are not trying to win you back. Fruit is respect for your boundary even when it disappoints them. Fruit is ownership without excuses. Fruit is patience with your healing. Fruit is accountability that does not demand instant access as a reward. Fruit is their willingness to become better even if you never reopen the door. That is how you know the difference between regret and repentance. Regret wants relief. Repentance accepte transformation. Regret says, I feel bad that I lost you. Repentance says, I understand how I harmed you, and I will not become that person again. Regret wants your comfort. Repentance respects your peace. Regret may knock. Repentance will not break down the door. And until you see fruit, Do not confuse emotion with evidence. Chosen one, this is where your old self must finally rest. The old you survived by hoping. The old you stayed by explaining. The old you loved by overextending. The old you forgave without requiring change. The old you kept believing the potential would become the person. The old you gave access because being chosen felt safer than being alone. But the old you cannot lead the new season. Thank that version of you. Do not hate that version. That version carried you through what you did not yet know how to leave. That version loved with everything it had. That version believed in people because it still believed love could awaken them. That version endured because it did not know endurance was costing you your own spirit. That version was not stupid. That version was surviving. But now, survival is not enough. Now, you are being called into wisdom. Now, you are being called into clarity. Now, you are being called into a love that includes yourself. Now, you are being called into boundaries that do not apologize for protecting what is holy. Now, you are being called into a future where you do not have to lose yourself to prove you are loyal. Because loyalty without self-respect becomes bondage. Forgiveness without boundaries becomes access for repeated harm. Patience without discernment becomes delay. Love without truth becomes a cage. And you were not born to live in a cage built from your own compassion. You were born to rise. You were born to carry light without begging people to stop mishandling it. You were born to love deeply, but not destructively. You were born to forgive freely, but not foolishly. You were born to feel deeply, but not be ruled by every emotional pull. You were born to hear God more clearly than you hear the memory of the person who confused you. That is why this season may feel strange. Because, for the first time, you are not chasing closure from them. You are becoming closure for yourself. For the first time, you are not waiting for their apology to unlock your next chapter. You are walking into the next chapter with or without their apology. For the first time, you are not making your peace dependent on their maturity. You are letting God mature something inside you that no person can take away again. And when that shift happens, people feel it. They may not know what changed. They may not have language for it. But they feel when your energy no longer reaches for them. They feel when your silence is no longer wounded silence, but healed distance. They feel when your absence is no longer a tactic, but a truth. They feel when the door is not being held closed by bitterness, but by wisdom. That is when your life starts speaking. Not through proving, not through posting, not through revenge, not through trying to look happy, but through alignment. You become calmer. You become clearer. You become harder to manipulate. You become less available to confusion. You become less impressed by words that are not backed by fruit. You become less willing to explain what your spirit has already outgrown. You become more selective with your time. You become more protective of your peace. You become more sensitive to truth, but less controlled by chaos. And this is what they did not expect. They expected your pain to make you smaller, but God is using it to make you clearer. They expected your heartbreak to make you desperate, but God is using it to make you discerning. They expected your silence to mean you were still waiting, but God is using it to teach you how to stop handing your future to the past. They expected you to remain emotionally available to the same pattern, but the pattern no longer has permission. The cycle no longer has permission. The old attachment no longer has permission. The fantasy no longer has permission. The lie that you are hard to love no longer has permission. The voice that says you were too much no longer has permission. The memory that says you should have done more no longer has permission. The person who only honored you after losing you no longer gets to define what love means to you. That authority is returning to God. That authority is returning to truth. That authority is returning to the healed version of you. And this is why you must be careful with what you call love in this next season. Love will not require you to betray your discernment. Love will not make you feel crazy for noticing what is real. Love will not use your vulnerability as a weapon. Love will not punish you for having standards. Love will not call you dramatic for asking for honesty. Love will not make your nervous system live in constant emergency. Love will not only become gentle when you are finally ready to leave. Real love carries responsibility. Real love honors access. Real love protects what it knows about you. Real love does not treat your softness like a weakness to exploit. Real love does not make you pay for being deep. Real love does not make you apologize for needing truth. And until that kind of love arrives, you are not empty. You are being prepared. You are being rebuilt. You are being returned to yourself. You are learning how peaceful life can become when you stop letting unstable people become the center of your emotional world. And yes, there may still be moments when you miss them. Do not shame yourself for that. Missing someone does not mean you should return. Missing someone does not mean the relationship was safe. Missing someone does not mean God is telling you to reopen the door. Sometimes you miss the good. Sometimes you miss the hope. Sometimes you miss the version of them you believed they could become. Sometimes you miss the part of yourself that still felt innocent before everything changed. Sometimes you miss the dream, not the reality. So when the missing comes, let it pass through you without making it your master. You can say, I miss what I hoped this would become, but I will not betray what God revealed. You can say, I love them, but I love my peace too. You can say, I forgive them, but I will not hand them the key. You can say, I remember the good, but I will not deny the harm. You can say, I bless them, but I release them. You can say, I am not bitter, I am awake. That is the difference. You are not trying to erase the past. You are trying to stop being ruled by it. You are not pretending it never mattered. You are admitting that it mattered, but it is not allowed to become your prison. You are not acting like you never loved them. You are simply no longer willing to prove your love by abandoning yourself. That is restoration. And as restoration continues, your inner signal will become stronger. At first it may return quietly, a small no in your spirit, a small peace when you choose distance, a small heaviness when something is not aligned, a small clarity when someone's words sound beautiful but their energy feels unsafe, a small courage to pause instead of rushing, a small strength to not answer immediately, a small wisdom to let time reveal what chemistry tries to hide. Honor those small signals. They are not random. They are part of your rebuilding. They are the early signs that the fog is lifting. They are the evidence that the part of you that was buried under confusion is breathing again. And this is why daily clarity matters. Because your future cannot be led by a mind that is still full of the voices of people who mishandled you. Your calling cannot be carried by a spirit that keeps returning to the old wound for permission. Your next level cannot be built on emotional chaos. You need stillness. You need truth. You need a rhythm that helps you come back to yourself. So if this message has been speaking to the part of you that is tired of mental fog, tired of overthinking, tired of replaying old pain, tired of waking up with your energy tied to someone who no longer deserves that access, do not ignore that nudge. Give yourself a daily place to reset. 7 minutes may sound small, but small rituals become spiritual signals when they are done with intention. Put on your headphones. Close the door to the noise. Let those few minutes become a declaration. My mind is not a battlefield for old betrayal. My clarity matters. My inner signal matters. My peace is worth protecting. The Genius song is linked in the description and the pinned comment for those who feel led to use it as a simple support tool in this season of clarity, focus, and inner restoration. Again, it does not replace the deeper work. It supports the moment where you decide to stop living under the fog. Use the correct link in the description or pinned comment, because there are imitations and fake versions using the name. And if you choose to begin, do not treat it casually. Treat it like 7 minutes of agreement with the version of you that is coming back. 7 minutes for your clarity. 7 minutes for your peace. 7 minutes for your signal. 7 minutes for the chosen one who is done letting the past own the mind. Now, return to the final truth. They may have realized you were not ordinary, but that is not the miracle. The miracle is that you are realizing it too, not as ego, not as pride, not as superiority, but as remembrance. You are remembering that your heart was never created to be mishandled. You are remembering that your softness was never a weakness. You are remembering that your depth was never a defect. You are remembering that your discernment was never drama. You are remembering that your need for honesty was never too much. You are remembering that your loyalty was sacred, even when it was given to someone who did not know how to value it. You are remembering that being rejected by someone without capacity does not mean you lacked worth. It means they lacked the ability to hold what was in front of them, and that is no longer your shame to carry. Release the shame. Release the need to be understood. Release the old agreement that says you must be chosen by them in order to feel chosen by God. Release the fantasy that one perfect apology will erase the pattern. Release the guilt for finally having boundaries. Release the fear that protecting yourself makes you unloving. Release the version of you that kept waiting at the door of someone who had already shown you how they handle sacred things. You are allowed to leave the door closed. You are allowed to move forward quietly. You are allowed to stop answering energy that only comes back when it is hungry. You are allowed to stop being available to emotional emergencies created by people who ignored your pain when you were the one breaking. You are allowed to become peaceful without asking permission from those who benefited from your confusion. You are allowed to be whole, and wholeness may feel unfamiliar at first. Peace may feel strange when chaos was your normal. Silence may feel uncomfortable when you were used to explaining. Boundaries may feel harsh when you were trained to overgive. Clarity may feel lonely when you were addicted to the old emotional pull. But stay with it. Stay with the peace long enough for your body to stop craving the storm. Stay with the silence long enough for your spirit to stop reaching backward. Stay with the boundary long enough for your heart to learn it is safe with you. Stay with the truth long enough for the lie to lose its voice. Because this is how you rise. Not all at once. Not through one dramatic moment. Not by pretending you are never sad. Not by acting like the pain never touched you. You rise every time you do not reopen the wound for a familiar voice. You rise every time you trust the signal you used to ignore. You rise every time you choose peace over proving. You rise every time you let silence protect what explaining used to expose. You rise every time you refuse to make someone else's regret your assignment. You rise every time you remember that sacred access is not owed to anyone. You rise every time you choose the version of you that God is restoring over the version of you that trauma trained to beg. And one day, they may look back and fully understand. They may understand that you love them in a way they were not ready to hold. They may understand that your patience was not weakness. They may understand that your silence was not defeat. They may understand that your absence became the consequence of their carelessness. They may understand that they did not just lose a person. They lost access. They lost covering. They lost warmth. They lost a mirror. They lost the kind of loyalty that cannot be forced, bought, replaced, or manipulated back into existence. And maybe they will grieve that. Maybe they will regret it. Maybe they will finally say the words you once needed to hear. But by then, you may not need them in the same way. Not because you hate them, not because you became cold, but because you became free. And freedom changes what you are willing to reopen. Freedom changes what you call love. Freedom changes what you accept as an apology. Freedom changes what you allow near your peace. Freedom changes what you do when the past knocks. The healed version of you does not have to answer every knock. The healed version of you does not have to prove the door is closed. The healed version of you does not have to explain why access has changed. The healed version of you can simply keep becoming. And that is what you must do now. Keep becoming. Keep healing. Keep listening. Keep guarding the sacred. Keep choosing peace. Keep letting God rebuild what careless hands damaged. Keep letting your future become louder than their version of the past. Keep letting your clarity return. Keep letting your softness be restored in safer places. Keep letting your light rise without dragging old shadows with you. Because sacred things do not lose value when someone fails to recognize them. Gold is still gold in the dirt. A seed is still alive underground. A crown is still a crown before anyone places it on your head. And you, chosen one, were still chosen in the season when they treated you like you were common. That is why this ending did not destroy you. It revealed you. It revealed your depth. It revealed your endurance. It revealed your discernment. It revealed who could not go with you. It revealed how much of yourself you were willing to lose for love, and it taught you never to lose that much again. So let them realize. Let the law speak. Let the door remain closed if peace requires it. Let your name be cleared in rooms you never enter. Let your future become louder than their version of the past. Let the sacred in you be protected by the wisdom you earned. And from this moment forward, do not chase the one who broke the law of honor. Do not beg the one who mishandled access. Do not return to the place that only saw your value when your absence became painful. You are not ordinary. You are not disposable. You are not the wound they left behind. You are not the story they told. You are not the person they failed to honor. You are not too much. You are not hard to love. You are not crazy for feeling what your spirit already knew. You are not weak because you stayed. You are not bitter because you left. You are not unloving because you finally chose peace. You are the one who survived the violation and still chose to become whole. You are the one who cried and still rose. You are the one who was mishandled and still kept a sacred heart. You are the one who lost access to them, but gained access to yourself. You are the one who stopped begging to be seen and started becoming impossible to ignore. And if this message reached the place in you that knows it is time to rise, write this in the comments. I take back sacred access. Write it as a line in the spirit. Write it as a declaration over your mind. Write it as a boundary over your future. Write it as a reminder that your heart is no longer open to people who only recognize holiness after they wound it. And after you write it, do not just leave it as words. Live it. When the old memory calls, live it. When the familiar voice returns, live it. When loneliness tries to romanticize the wound, live it. When guilt tries to make you reopen what wisdom closed, live it. When your mind starts replaying their version of the story, live it. When your heart misses the dream, live it. When the past knocks, live it. I take back sacred access, because this time you are not waiting for them to choose you. You are choosing the version of you that no longer abandons itself. This time, you are not begging for a seat in their life. You are protecting the room God is rebuilding in yours. This time, you are not chasing the apology. You are walking in the freedom. This time, you are not asking why they could not see you. You are finally seeing yourself. And chosen one, hear this before you go. They may have realized you were not ordinary, but heaven knew before they ever touched your life. God knew before they ever spoke your name. Your future knew before your past tried to break you. Your calling knew before rejection tried to rename you. The sacred in you was never waiting for their recognition to become real. It was real the whole time. Now rise like you know it. Rise without bitterness. Rise without apology. Rise without chasing. Rise without explaining. Rise with peace. Rise with clarity. Rise with your keys back in your hand. Rise with your inner signal restored. Rise with your heart guarded, not hardened. Rise with the kind of silence that does not need to be understood in order to be powerful. Rise with the knowing that what God is restoring in you cannot be controlled by the person who mishandled you. Let them realize, you rise,